Ruslan Belov here again with today's briefing on combat operations from the Ukrainian front. In Kharkiv region, a catastrophe is brewing for the AFU as Russian forces keep pressing and closing the ring between two footholds. There's also been a breakthrough by the Russian army in the Druzhkivka direction, confirmed by objective control footage. We'll cover all of that in this episode. Let's start right away with the Druzhkivka direction, where Russian forces have taken another settlement on the city's outskirts, the village of Petrivka. The 102nd Brigade released objective control footage of the fighting for the town, and this settlement has indeed now been taken by Russian forces. As a reminder, according to my information, the settlement of Novokhyarivka has also been taken. That means that to move reliably into Druzhkivka, what's left is to take the settlement of Reisky, and there are actually two settlements with that name next to each other, a larger one on the north side of the Kazini Turiets River, and another directly opposite on the south side around Druzhkivka. The Russian army strikes identified FPV drone operator positions every day, and we got more such footage today. Going forward, I expect the Russian army to push toward both settlements and enter Druzhkivka itself before long. It might have seemed the Ukrainian army holds the western flank far more firmly than the eastern one, since there are far fewer defensive works there than on the eastern side, where Ukraine has been preparing to meet Russian forces since 2014. Huge amounts of concrete were poured there, and the trenches are excellently built, everything done properly. Back in 2023 to 24, experts were already saying the way into the Slovyansk agglomeration should go through the western flank, since it would be much easier and the terrain is far more favorable for it. That's exactly what we're seeing now, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Russian army enters Slovyansk and Kramatorsk not only from the east but from the west too. For the Ukrainian army, this breakthrough lengthens the front, and containing the Russian push now has to happen on every side, west, east and north alike, meaning far more troops are needed than Russia needs for its offensive. In other words, Russia can strike Druzhkivka with one thrust, as now, while also pushing north and west if the defenses there are that weak. Overall, Ukrainian command faces a tough task. Holding the line here matters a great deal, because with every settlement lost, the situation for Slovyansk, Kramatorsk and Druzhkivka worsens considerably. There are only some 5 to 7 kilometers left to cover northward before the Ukrainian army runs into serious logistics trouble, with Russian operators able to reach the AFU grouping's main supply routes in these cities. Around Druzhkivka, we've already seen an FPV strike on the northern road, which now supplies the city from Kramatorsk. On the map, Druzhkivka itself looks almost surrounded by rivers, sitting right in the middle, which makes it more vulnerable from the Russian side. Cutting supply across a few bridges would be enough to make the garrison's supply situation suffer noticeably. Fighting for the city will definitely begin this autumn. It'll be a genuinely epic battle, and arguably just the first chapter, since Kramatorsk and Slovyansk still lie ahead. A huge volume of data is coming in from the Kramatorsk direction on Russian. Advances stretching from Alexandrivka all the way to Kostiantynivka. Enormous numbers of FPV strikes are hitting logistics routes around Slovyansk. Nothing goes unnoticed. The front, one could say, has become somewhat transparent. There are no hidden maneuvers left, unlike, say, in World War II. Quietly massing forces and then striking at the right spot is now practically impossible for either side. Hundreds of FPV drones can wipe out an entire column in 20 minutes now, at a cost in dollar terms of mere cents, next to the infantry and armor that would go into such an attack. In this contest between sword and shield, the shield is currently winning, but I think new ways to advance in this configuration will be found. Just as a way out of the World War I stalemate eventually emerged, the same kind of turning point will come here too. In my view, that becomes possible if the Russian side gets a Starlink equivalent of its own, with a huge number of terminals. Then there's a real chance to wear Ukraine down and force it into peace on Russian terms. For now, though, Ukraine can keep fighting for a long time yet, despite losses in manpower and damage to its economy and demographics. Zelensky has bet everything on Europe backing him no matter what, since letting Ukraine fall isn't in the EU's interest. it back to the front. Moving into Donbas, there are important developments here today too. As we recall, in this remaining sliver of Donbas under AFU control, only two of the largest cities remain, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. East of Sloviansk, the last shield on the way to the city is the small town of Mykolaiivka, built around the Sloviansk thermal power plant. Russian forces are actively trying to approach it from the direction of the previously captured Oleksandrivka, and today they managed to take the adjoining areas, advancing through the tree lines. Also from the direction of the previously captured Druzhkivka, they've now reached two neighboring villages, Orikovatka from the south and Zaporizhzhia from the north. Overall, fewer and fewer settlements remain on the way to Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, and the buffer zone east of these cities is shrinking fast by the day. Interesting information is also coming in today from the Zaporizhzhia direction. Operators from the Russian Rubicon grouping reportedly managed to send FPV drones 65 kilometers deep into Ukraine's rear and strike AFU transport there. This isn't the first time we've seen such footage. Similar footage came from this same area a couple of days ago too. It's not yet clear how Russian operators pulled this off. As I understand it, the FPV drones themselves were on radio control from a so-called mother drone, but how that mother drone got there and how strikes were relayed live through it remains unclear. It's quite possible Russian forces flew it in on small high-altitude balloons. The AFU has also been testing this trick to save fuel, mounting a drone on a balloon, lifting it very high, then releasing it so it ends up roughly 150 kilometers deep behind the line. It's entirely possible the Russian army tried the same approach. The Russian army struck Odessa region again near the Mayaki bridge. A truck was hit by a Geren loitering munition. It's not known what the truck was carrying or why it was picked as a target, but traffic on that road stopped for several hours. Russia clearly wants to cut the southern part of Odessa region off from the rest of the country since it's connected to the mainland by just one bridge. Russian forces haven't managed to destroy this bridge outright. It's been struck more than once, but the Ukrainian side keeps managing to repair it, and it should be said the strikes haven't caused it critical damage so far. Strikes on the city itself are also continuing. As a reminder, for a couple of weeks now, the Russian army has essentially blocked Ukrainian ports for grain and metal exports, the country's main export goods. Ukraine has also arranged with Moldova to use rail transport to move goods out. Overall, the Ukrainian side now has major problems with the Black Sea. They like to say they've blocked Russia's access to it, but Russia has blocked theirs too. Maritime transport today is poorly suited to modern warfare. Any ship, even a warship, hit by several dozen Starlink-guided drones won't be able to hold off the attack and will take damage, which of course won't sink it, but damage there will be. In the eastern Druzhkivka direction, Russian forces continue their operation to clear out pockets. In Chasiv Yar, Russian assault units have advanced with fighting in the Yushny and Shevchenko areas. The western outskirts of the ruined city are back under Russian control. The troops are pushing further, having taken the forests near Mykolaiivka. Fighting is now underway there and in neighboring Krasny. Around Moloksharka and Petrivka, assault units also managed to clear the remaining built-up areas. Fighting is now shifting toward the settlement of Stinky. Some experts and OSINT analysts had earlier reported it cleared, but that appears not to have been fully the case. Going forward, we may see the formation of a semi-encirclement around Podolsky, which Ukrainian forces will likely have to abandon, or, more likely, no one will be able to get out of there at all, since Russian assault troops are getting active support from drone operators there. Fighting also continues around Roskishne and Dovka-Balka. Russian forces attacked through a ravine toward Mykolaiv. If this goes well, it will be possible to stop Ukrainian counterattacks against Roskishne and Dovka-Balka from the north, take these settlements fully, and begin the assault on Mykolaiv to a boil. Units of the Russian northern grouping of forces, Sever, continue advancing in the Berluk direction. New gains have been recorded on the eastern flank, where the settlement of Vodian has come under Russian infantry control. The village sits between the recently captured Anishchin and the larger Olkuvatka, where street fighting has already broken out, with Ukrainian forces trying to keep Russian troops from reaching their defensive line. Russian units are widening the eastern flank of the Cauldron Neck along the Ustinivka-Vodian line, which could potentially allow the encirclement of Ukrainian positions to be closed along a broader front. More than 10 settlements currently sit inside the forming encirclement zone. That said, this is hardly about large concentrations of Ukrainian manpower. In today's drone war reality, individual foxholes and trench sections can be held by just 1 to 2 people, covering up to several kilometers of responsibility. Most personnel after the fall of Vovchansk were pulled back to previously prepared positions around Veliki Berluk, where extensive defensive lines had been built. Taking the approaches to Veliki Berluk will, going forward, let Russia push the line of contact back significantly in this part of the Belgorod border area, reducing Ukraine's room to maneuver on the positions it still holds, while also easing life somewhat in Shebekino district of Belgorod region, which Ukraine has been hitting hard with drones over the past year. Once Russian forces have built a roughly 20-kilometer deep defensive belt with several lines in Kharkiv region, the Sever grouping's attention will likely shift to other sectors. It's reasonable to expect that once the pocket near Bilikolo is finished off and cleared, Sever's troops will start attacking further west toward the neighboring Slobodyanske direction near Posechalopan. Before we close today's episode, a couple of stories worth flagging. Russia says it's ready to swap 224 convicted Ukrainian civilians for Russians held by Kyiv. Yana Landratova, Russia's human rights commissioner, says Moscow has finalized a list of 224 Ukrainian citizens who were convicted in Russia on various charges and is ready to exchange them for Russians held by Ukraine since 2014 and 2022. She said Russia is ready to hand them over as early as tomorrow morning for one purpose only, to get its own people back, referring to residents of the DPR, LPR, and Crimea who've been waiting years for their return. According to her, over the past month, Russia has already offered Kyiv 3 different exchange list proposals, including both servicemen and convicts, but the Ukrainian side has turned all of them down. Landratova says Ukraine doesn't want these 224 people back at all, that Kyiv is after publicity, not actual lives. The second story, Putin has promised a mirror response to the seizure of Russian merchant vessels by Western countries. Speaking aboard the missile cruiser Varyak during the closing stage of Pacific Fleet exercises, Putin called the seizure of Russian merchant ships by Western countries piracy and robbery, and said Russia will respond in kind, not only in the waters where such attacks are attempted, but anywhere, including within the Pacific Fleet's zone of responsibility. He said some Western governments have now moved to seizing Russian vessels outright and selling off the confiscated cargo, and that Russia will respond wherever it sees fit, not necessarily in the same waters where they go after our ships. What's actually behind this? The EU's latest sanctions package allows member states to confiscate oil carried on Russian tankers, something that wasn't previously permitted. European states had detained Russian ships before, but the vessels and cargo were eventually released. Between December 2025 and March 2026, at least 14 tankers were detained, and the new rules mean any future seizures could result in the cargo actually being confiscated and sold rather than just a temporary hold. This comes about 2 weeks after Putin had already called for the Russian side to respond carefully but decisively to any attempts to board or seize its vessels. Today's statement sharpens that into an explicit threat of retaliation against Western shipping wherever Russia chooses, not just in the areas where its own ships are being targeted. That's how things look on the front today. Thanks so much for watching, dear friends.